Okay, we're on the internet.
We are live. Hello, guys. How are you doing? Okay, I am not the most fashionable person in the world. It may shock you to find out, but I do suddenly have a reason for rethinking my fashion choices in terms of how I feel about my impact in the world and stuff that I really hadn't thought about before. So thank you very much, Josh, for joining us today.
Oh, no problem.
I think people at home, if you haven't thought about your fashion choices and their impact on the world, you're about to, and there's something really interesting here, so stay tuned. Firstly, in a sentence, what is Salvage?
Salvage, it's a clothing label. We dye all of our fabrics using native Australian plants or salvaged ingredients in order to get rid of the damaging impact of synthetic textile dyes.
Okay. So go into that a bit deeper for me. Like, why are people not using this kind of dyeing technology already?
Well, since 1850, pretty much everything's been synthetically dyed, especially on a large scale, and no one has done natural dye at scale yet. It's tricky to do, and there's a lot of things to work out and complexities. But now that we can get ingredients from all over the place, I think we can do it.
Okay, so it's easier to like make a little chemical formulation, and if it poisons a bunch of people on the other side of the world, I can kind of ignore that, but you can only ignore that for so long. And now if you can put the effort in that you're obviously putting in with this and getting the kind of results that you are, there is a better way of doing this.
Yeah, well, another way to look at it is when we think about the impacts of that fashion has on the environment, a lot of the time the dyes don't really come to mind. But it actually is it's a massive part of the damage that the fashion industry does on the environment and to people. And there's a lot of things that's hard to kind of get away from. So growing cotton, it takes a lot of resources, but then what do you do instead of cotton? You do these, you do these other things and then market it to be amazing. But then there's heaps of resources that go into them. To me, the lowest hanging fruit is the dye, because things we need to color our clothing, it's all around us. So we don't need to use these chemicals. You walk down the road, there's eucalyptus leaves that shed massive amounts of leaves. You can color, a lot of different materials. You make yourself avocado toast, you throw away the seeds, that can color clothing. You cut an onion, the skins, that can color clothing. Drink some wine, you don't finish the rest of the wine, that can color clothing. Your coffee grounds, that can color, you can go on.
Okay, cool. So I love that idea of there's color and dye effectively everywhere.
Yeah.
Why don't we use that instead of kind of manufacturing artificial stuff?
Yeah.
So who were you before starting Salvage?
Who was I before starting Salvage? I finished uni here in 2020. I was mainly working as a photographer. I was a graduate who didn't really know what they wanted to do. And I was trying to get a job just as a fashion design assistant, and it was a real struggle. And I was really just struggling to what do I do with my life? I've done this 4-year degree, and I'm just trying to get an assistant job, and it's not happening. So yeah. Okay,
so love the industry, want to do something in it, and then figuring out, okay, maybe I can do something for myself.
Well, I was always conflicted about fashion because I love the industry, but it's just the fashion industry does a lot of harm. You making a t-shirt, you go buy a t-shirt that costs, I don't know, like $20. There's no way to do that without harming people and the environment. And I like clothing, I like buying clothes, I like wearing different things, and it's like, how do I continue to do this thing that I love without harming the environment and harming people? And that's kind of where this came from.
Awesome. So tell me about that. I understand you've had a long kind of experimentation period on this. What did that look like?
So the first time I ever did a natural dye was 2018. It was right across the road. It was in the dye lab. Our teacher was Joanna Fowles, who she is actually in her own right is a really expert dyer. And I had to hand in an assignment the next day. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I spoke to her. She said, why don't you try a natural dye? I looked up online and I read you can get color from eucalyptus. I have a eucalyptus tree down the road. And I remember I tried a few things, didn't work, and eventually I found this recipe completely by accident where I kind of got this crazy color out of the eucalyptus leaves. And I was like, this is crazy. I get obsessed with things. I go down the rabbit hole hard. Like once I'm into something, there's no getting me out. Like you can have a conversation with me. I'm like, well, what I'm doing something like I'm thinking about this, and yeah, that's kind of what the genesis of this.
Okay, so I love that kind of motivation and what it helps people to figure out. And it obviously has allowed you to figure out that there's a couple of good ways of doing this.
Yeah.
What did that then enable once you started to figure out this is possible, this is possible? What are you doing now?
What are we doing now? So there's a big gap between then and now. A lot of it has to do with Victoria, who kind of helped co-found SALVGE as it is today. And she kind of brought that, that business mind. She's worked in other startups, but we also have to talk about like my honours year collection, where I basically made a collection entirely dyed with waste products and Australian native plants, and that got some good press. But as well as that, my dissertation that I did at uni was on the synthetic effects that the negative effects that synthetic dyes have on the environment, workers and wearers, and also like the carcinogenic properties of these dyes and the rates of cancer among people that live near dye plants or work at dye plants. I found it really upsetting, and I was like, I just couldn't comprehend that, we're buying these clothing that has all these chemicals in them. It didn't make sense to me, especially when you look at like, I don't buy shampoo with parabens, sulfates in it. So why would I wear a t-shirt or a jumper that has these same chemicals on them? It just didn't make sense to me.
Okay. So you then end up with a collection that you're obviously happy with and got a lot of positive reactions.
The collection was just, how do I get through this uni degree? Like I felt like I really like I'm not an academic or I'm just not good at any kind of structured learning, and I really struggled, and I was like, just get through it, we finish it. And then like, friends and family really like it, but then we get some good feedback, and then, Victoria helps she puts together this website for us, and then it kind of says like, hey, this can make us some money, and yeah.
But then how do you do a small production run of that kind of thing?
How do we do a small production run? So we work with a company called Creation Collective Co. in Melbourne, and essentially what they do is they really cater for small fashion labels. So there's two different levels of production that you have if you're manufacturing in Australia. One is, a major manufacturing house where they go, we're going to make you 100 units, anything less, goodbye. Or you go to like a maker or a seamstress and they go, we'll make you 2 units, anything more, goodbye. And there's like this middle ground that doesn't really exist. So this girl, Annalise Bridgman, she started up Creation Collective, and they're our manufacturer. They're in Melbourne, and they kind of help us source our materials, do our pattern making, do our grading, and they manufacture everything for us. Cool.
Okay, so nice to hear that kind of thing is happening in Australia.
It's great. Australian manufacturing it's growing. It's the ball's rolling, and buy Australian. We're very passionate about that. We want to stay Australian made,
and not have to ship it around the world as well.
Yeah, it's just buying Australian made is just one of the easiest ways just to cut the carbon footprint of clothing, because especially if it's being sold here, because cotton's grown here, it's usually the cotton's finished in China and then it goes somewhere else, it gets made, and it's here, there, and everywhere. No?
Okay, so naturally dyed, made locally. Kind of well-designed, attractive kind of clothing.
Kind of you to say.
Yeah, as far as my opinion goes. What comes next now that you have this being manufactured?
What comes next? So there are a few things that are coming next. So at the moment, we've just finished designing our new collection. That's with the Creation Collective in Melbourne. It's being manufactured. We're getting stuff back slowly, and with all the dyes done here. And then we've also working with another company called a Bandit Design Group. They've just done our branding and our new logo and everything, and then our new website's in development. So the new collection that we're going to have pieces in stock finally, because it's been hard to hold pieces in stock. That's going to go live in November. So that's going to be we're going to do a really hard launch and get some influencers who we gifted, launching everything at once. So hopefully we do a lot of business and sell a lot, but looking past that, we really need to invest in our manufacturing capabilities. We're kind of at the limits of what we can do with our vats at home. We're also like hoping to kind of, engage with chemical engineers to kind of help get our formulas down because, even though I'm super into this, I'm not a chemist. So I can kind of work out, this is the pH, this is the temperature of this dye, but I need like the formulas and the right kind of lexicon written down in order to kind of have that, and then also potentially own that as intellectual property.
Yeah.
And then past there, the reason that we do this is our why, and our why is we don't want synthetic dyes to just exist. We want to use natural, obviously they're going to have to exist in some form, especially for synthetic textiles, but we want to have less synthetic dyes out there. We want less harm caused by them. So if we're just dyeing for ourselves, then we're not going to make a massive difference as one label. We want to expand big enough where we can dye for other companies as well, so we can take on, we can dye for a lot of Australia and internationally as well.
No, that makes sense. And I think especially if you're developing this IP of this and this and this, make this kind of color and it's got these kind of qualities, and this is the permanent version and this is the version that didn't work out so well, and then other people can help industrialize that process, then that sounds quite interesting to me.
Yeah, and I'm always chasing colors. Like so every plant can make a color, essentially, if you use enough of it, but only certain plants can have color that is robust enough for like actual use. And we're just endlessly trialing and error, and it's usually just error. And when I get a new color, it's like, it brings me so much joy just personally when we land on like a color shade that I've been chasing, and we do all our testing and we do all our QC and the color lasts. I'm like over the moon. So we're constantly chasing new colors, and if we can get like a chemical engineer on board, then like hopefully they can be like, this is why this color works, and we can kind of go from there.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I love this. I'm hearing from this that chemists or industrial chemists or people that work in this kind of manufacturing would be useful.
Yeah.
I'm going to be buying some as soon as they come out. I'm sure everyone here is as well, and people can look out for the announcement. I'll get a UTS Startups logo across it. Would anything else be helpful on the journey from here?
Look, I'm as you probably tell, I'm not an expert in many things. I'm good at like a handful of things, but people are experts in marketing and also financial modeling. We kind of need to kind of work out our financial models of what it's going to cost to do a large-scale dye factory, be able to model that and kind of make those numbers work, because that that's not the easiest thing to work out.
Okay, so people with experience in financial modeling around manufacturing of things, that would be useful as well.
Yeah.
I'll just throw in one quick question to finish up around going through this journey. Starting at university, doing stuff that you cared about, going into the industry that you cared about, and then being more driven by your own passion and what you wanted to work on, and going into entrepreneurship because of that. How has that changed you as a person?
How's it changed me as a person? So I think, in terms of myself, but also, my, Victoria, who kind of handles so much of this, it's changed us we used to wait for things to be perfect before we did them. And we used to think that like, I know you need to be an expert. And we've kind of realized that the enemy of the good is the great. If you're waiting for things to be perfect, they're not going to happen. And it's given us the confidence to kind of go for it. And it's also helped us to realize when we need to stop and take a break and ask for help. Okay.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. We're definitely aiming for good here, not great, in everything we do, but this is great. And I love the amount of attention this is getting in the windows here as well. The number of people that have stopped outside having a look. I don't think you can have any trouble getting an audience for this, for people that realize what kind of impact they're having in their clothing choices. Yeah. So we'll leave it there, but please a round of applause for Josh and SALVGE.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.